Hey everyone, this is Dan, Stone Photo Gear. I hope you're all well today. I had a little request. This is originally off of the Gear Maker forum online, and someone had asked about turning and top stitching. And I found a technique that works well for me. A lot of my products involve some sort of padding, whether it be felt or foam, and sometimes just two layers of material, such as Cordura. I have here two layers of 1000 denier Cordura, but the technique is basically the same no matter what layers you have. If it is too thick and too bulky, however, I've found that it does tend to, you'll need to pull a little bit more when you're pulling out the seam. People have wondered, do you push out once you sew this inside out? You kind of push it out and then sew, push it out and sew, push it out, flatten it down, press it down. I found that kind of pulling the seam using a seam ripper, this is just the standard generic seam ripper, I found keeping one that's kind of dull, so it's not sharp anymore, it's dulled. I use a lot of bonded nylon thread, bonded polyester, so it eats these things up pretty quickly. Thankfully I don't need to use them all that much, but I found a seam ripper is the perfect tool for getting into that seam and kind of pulling it out gently. So let me just do a little demo here for you. So just gonna, basically we got our two faces of the material, so good side to good side, and then obviously you sew down your edge of your material with whatever seam allowance you normally use. I usually use a 3/8 seam allowance. So then what you do in order to turn, so you turn your material inside out, doing whatever you need to do. So you're kind of left with the dilemma. Obviously, if you can press the material out as much as possible, that's great, but you're still kind of left with a bulk, as you can see here. So getting in with that seam ripper right into the seam, kind of pulling it out, kind of not with the blade part, but just with the actual little tine, little point, getting in there and not cutting the threads. Obviously you want to make sure that you're going to do this so you're pulling gently yet firmly, so it's a nicely pulled out, and we can obviously arrange the seam if you want so it's nice and good. And I have an edge guide foot here, 1/16 edge guide, so however you want to do that. Sometimes I'll just use a standard foot and just kind of run down the edge, and it's close enough when you get it by eye. So you can do as much as you want, pull this out as much as you want, but I found flattening it down a little bit, and you go down the side, pull out a little bit more, go down the side, so on and so forth. And then you obviously the more complex your shape, the more you're going to have to really kind of watch it, because you can get a little bit of rollover. So if you got just two pieces of open material, you can kind of line them up and then just use the seam ripper to kind of pull the seam out. So then press it down. Cordura can kind of hold its shape a little bit. So you just kind of pull that extra little bit out. See how it just kind of pulls out just enough. Put that seam ripper right out into the seam, about every 1/4 inch, every 3/8 of an inch, give or take. So every 4 to 6 millimeters, and then just keep going all the way around. Now, obviously, if you come to corners, or if you come to, if you have a curve like a radius, then you'll need to make relief cuts in your before you turn it inside out. You'll need to make little relief cuts so it can really form a nice radius. That's the thing that I found works best for me. So what your result is a nice flat pulled out seam, and using an edge guide foot helps you just to get a nice straight line of stitching. Here's the bobbin side right down the side, so you can see it takes practice, so the more you do it the better you get at it. And if you use a lighter weight liner material like a 400 denier 420 pack cloth, it's much easier 2 layers of 1000D. It's a little tricky, but